Hey guys, tonight we're following someone very important and very bad at planning. Poseidon is that Poseidon, the Greek god of the sea. Earthquakes and suspiciously damp facial hair has decided he needs a break. Not from ruling the oceans or hurling tsunamis at people who annoy him. No, he just wants a good beach day. Sun sand, maybe a salted fig smoothie. The only problem, he has no idea where to go. You're already standing knee-deep in a foamy tide. Watching as Poseidon throws together a travel bag with all the grace of a toddler packing for preschool. He's muttering under his breath about wanting just one decent stretch of sand that dosen tea smell like Medusa's laundry. Into his clamshell tote go 3 kelp-wrapped pitas. 1 leaking flask of ambrosia, a trident he forgot to clean since the Kraken incident, and a folded papyrus map that may or may not be a restaurant menu. You can't tell. It's damp and smells faintly of olives. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Poseidon stomps down the sand with exaggerated purpose, like he's off to win a war, not locate beach chairs. Follow behind. Trudging through a trail of kelp, he keeps shedding like a molting lizard. You'd think the god of the sea would be better at seaside logistics, but no. His sandals squeak, his robe is caught in sea urchins. And his directions are, at best, a whispered suggestion from a seagull with a lisp. The map is no help. He squints at it like it owes him money. There's a big wet blob right over what might have been an arrow. This might say north, he mumbles, or Musaka. Historians still argue whether the gods actually used maps like mortals or just wandered around until divine coincidence did its thing. There's even a fringe theory involving Apollo's lyre being a secret GPS prototype. But that idea mostly came from one papyrus found under a wine stain. You pass a group of naiads sunbathing on a rock, who barely look up as Poseidon stomps by, muttering angrily about Zeus's stupid mountaintop brunches. One of them waves lazily. Looking for a beach again, she asks, not unkindly. He grunts and keeps walking. The thing is, Poseidon has been trying to find the perfect beach for centuries. There's a tablet back in Atlantis where he rated each coast with trident symbols, but he never made it past the beta version. One review simply reads, "Too many crabs, would not recommend. 1 wave out of 5. As you trail him, seagulls wheel overhead like overconfident spies. One dives suspiciously close to your ear and lets out a screech that sounds like left, but Poseidon scoffs. I'm not taking directions from seafood. That's when he realizes he's forgotten something. With the dramatic gasp of a theater kid denied the lead role, he stops. Snail lotion. I can't risk crow's feet again. Not after last summer. He fumbles through the tote. The lotion is gone. It's probably gifted to a passing jellyfish who asked nicely. You wait as he storms back to his palace briefly to grab a fresh vial made from fermented snail slime and crushed sea pearls, apparently. Great for exfoliation, bad for first dates, he says with a wink, as if you asked. You pretty sure he and T know what an actual beach day is supposed to involve? He's brought a conch shell that plays only dramatic orchestral battle music and a beach umbrella taller than the Parthenon. And did he really need to wear all 3 of his gold belts? Fashion or function, no one's sure. Still, there's something kind of hypnotic about the slow way his trident taps along the shore as he walks. It rings like distant thunder. You're lulled by the rhythm tap. Squelch, splash, splash, splash. It's almost enough to make you forget that you re-following a god who once lost a bet to a pelican. That part, it's actually true. At least according to a half-faded mosaic in a seaside village, where Poseidon supposedly wagered his crown that he could catch a flying fish with his eyes closed. He didn't. The pelican still wears the crown at certain festivals. Anyway, you continue inland slightly, because Poseidon has now decided maybe the perfect beach isn't coastal. What if it's hidden? Like one of those secret mortal coves you mortals always write about in love poems and bad travel scrolls. You're not sure he knows what secret means, considering he's glowing faintly and dragging a trident that's leaving a trench wide enough to trap an ox cart. Still, he's determined. Determined in the way a child is when they're convinced their sandcastle will survive high tide. And as you pass under crooked olive trees and past sleepy tortoises, you begin to suspect that this journey will not be short. Somewhere behind you, a wave collapses lazily onto shore, as if sighing, "Here we go again." And so you trudge on behind the damp, glimmering back of a sea god who cannot remember where he put his seaweed wrap and might accidentally start a whirlpool if someone mentions sunscreen too loudly. You're still walking, or trudging. It's somewhere between a stroll and a soul-searching shuffle now. With Poseidon a few slippery paces ahead of you, his damp robe fluttering like a disappointed flag. He's decided suddenly without warning that they should ask someone who knows things, which in his divine vocabulary means one person. The Oracle at Delphi. Because when you re a god who can command tsunamis, but still cut undecided between beach rocks or soft sand, you naturally consult the ancient equivalent of Google, a cryptic old woman in a smoky cave. So now you're climbing inland toward Delphi, which is not near the sea, and Poseidon complains the entire way. "Why are mountains so up?" he mutters, wiping sweat from his brow with a fish-scaled handkerchief. He's gotten himself tangled in grapevines 3 times already, and you had to untangle him from one moderately angry goat. When you reach the sanctuary, the place is half shrouded in mist and mystery. The air smells like old incense and recently extinguished ambition. Priests in flowing linen nod at Poseidon, pretending not to notice he just knocked over a sacred offering bowl with his trident. A couple of pigeons scatter with a noise like skeptical applause. Think the Pythia, the oracle herself, sits cross-legged over a crack in the earth, inhaling fumes that might be magical or might just be questionable plumbing. Her eyes are glassy and her voice trembles, like someone trying to remember whether they left the stove on. Poseidon steps forward. "I seek the best beach. Not a decent beach. Not a famous beach. The best. With soft tides, sun-warmed sand, and minimal screaming children." She tilts her head back, eyes fluttering. Then, in a voice that's part whisper, part thunderclap, she says, "The sand you seek sings beneath no sun. Find the goat who naps where rivers run. One flip-flop lost, one crab shall speak. The beach you want is not what you seek." Poseidon blinks. You blink. Somewhere in the back, a priest coughs. "Right," Poseidon says flatly. "Clear as sea mud. Perfect." Historians still argue whether the Delphic prophecies were deliberate riddles or just glorified improv acts. Some suspect the oracle got high on natural gases seeping through the fault lines. Others claim the Pythia was just extremely overbooked and liked to keep things vague to avoid refunds. As you leave the temple, Poseidon mutters, "Goats. Of course, always goats. Why is it always goats with these things?" You nod solemnly. Not because you understand, but because saying, "I have no idea what's happening," might get you turned into kelp. Down the hill you go, back toward the sea, or at least toward wherever Poseidon thinks rivers run. "Did she say a goat near a river?" he asks. "Or a goat who naps? What if the goat's awake? Does that cancel the prophecy?" He stops mid-thought. "Also, did she say a crab talks to me? Is that literal, or like metaphorical crab?" What is a metaphorical crab? There's no good answer to that. Sure enough, a few miles later, you find a river bend with a very lazy goat curled under a fig tree. Not sunglasses. You are not making this up. He is 100% wearing round-lensed sunglasses like some kind of enlightened farm animal. He doesn't move, just raises one eyebrow as you approach. Poseidon crouches beside him. "Oh, wise creature," he begins, and the goat sneezes in his face. "Bless you," you whisper, unsure of the etiquette, when livestock interrupts divine prophecy. The goat doesn't speak. But a crab scuttles out of the riverbank moments later, clicking its claws like castanets. Poseidon leans in. "This might be the one. Say something, wise crustacean." The crab stops moving, and very slowly it climbs on top of Poseidon's foot and just sits there. "This is ridiculous," Poseidon says. "I command storms. I once flooded half of Thessaly, and now I'm waiting for a prophetic crab." To be fair, the crab does seem oddly focused. You squint at it, and maybe, just maybe, it's pointing one claw toward the west. Or maybe it's just balancing. Or maybe this entire segment of your evening is a fever dream brought on by ancient snack rot. Still, Poseidon takes it as a sign. "Westward, then," he proclaims, as the crab finally disembarks and returns to its crabby business. You both set off again, following a goat's nap zone and a crab's vibe check. The logic is thin, but so is Poseidon's patience. Halfway through the next olive grove, he stops to snack. This involves pulling out the kelp pitas, now lukewarm and suspiciously soggy. He offers you one. You politely decline. Even a nymph wouldn't touch those. Not unless you had the digestive resilience of a small volcano. Fun historical sidebar. Ancient Greeks really did travel with dense snack cakes, some of which were wrapped in leaves or dipped in sea salt to last longer on sea journeys. But kelp wraps? It's a Poseidon original and probably why you haven't seen it sold in mortal markets. Back on the trail, you're starting to wonder if the beach even exists. Maybe it's a metaphor, you mumble. Poseidon spins around. Don't say that. Don't you dare say that. The last time someone told me Atlantis was a metaphor, I sunk their fishing village. He turns back, adjusting the strap on his now visibly leaking clamshell tote. It's leaving a thin trail of ambrosia behind, and a small army of bees is beginning to follow. One of them lands on your ear like a tiny, vibrating passenger. Poseidon sighs deeply. Do you think the oracle meant I'm looking in the wrong way? Like maybe I'm searching for a beach, but what I really need is... Nope, you interrupt gently. Let's just follow the crab and not get philosophical. Fair, he grumbles. Ahead of you, the terrain starts to shift. Less dry brush, more scattered shells. A good sign, maybe. But as Poseidon pulls out the map again still soggy, still unreadably, brace for another detour, or worse. Another goat clue. You hear it before you see it. The sound of something vaguely classical playing from what might be a reed pipe, possibly just an enchanted wind vent. Poseidon marches forward with fresh determination, eyes narrowed, lips pursed in a way that suggests he's ready to make someone responsible for his inconvenience. You're not sure who yet, but it's probably Hermes. It's always Hermes. The trail opens up to reveal Mount Olympus Mall, or what's left of it. Once the divine shopping nexus of the gods, now it's more like a mythological strip mall, having a midlife crisis. The air smells like expired nectar samples and crushed grapes. One lone centaur mops the entry fountain, and the neon sign over the entrance flickers between Olympus Mall and Empus M _ like it. It's not fully committed to its identity anymore. Poseidon pushes through the revolving marble doors, which squeak like offended dolphins. Just a quick stop, he says. I need sea oil. Last bottle turned me purple. Not ideal for beach photos. You follow him into the underlit atrium, where half the kiosks are shuttered and the other half are run by minor deities who really need side hustles. A sleepy satyr waves lazily from behind the ambrosia on a stick cart. In the distance, someone shouts, "Buy one, get one bronze spear free." You walk past a sad little store labeled Trident Trends, which appears to sell glittery weapon accessories and what look like trident cozies. Poseidon glares at it. They ruined my brand, he mumbles. Who needs velvet on a war fork? He turns into the aisle marked seaskin and surf supplies, where a dryad wearing a headset greets him with a weary blessings. Would you like a kelp pilling sample today? Poseidon says no. You say yes. She applies something to your wrist that smells suspiciously like pickled mushrooms. Not unpleasant, just unsettling. He rifles through the shelf and grabs a bottle with a dolphin logo and the words Poseidon. Ocean radiance for deities embossed in gold. This one better not stain my beard again, he grumbles. Last time, I glowed for 6 days straight. Hermes kept calling me Lighthouse Dad. Ah, yes, Hermes. Because just as you pass the checkout scroll, there he is, gliding in on winged sandals, sipping from a juice pouch like he's just stepped out of a promotional cloud. His hair is perfectly tousled, and his messenger bag hangs just so. Of course he's here. Of course he is. Poseidon. Hermes calls out, arms wide. Still looking for that beach, huh? How's that going for you? Fine, Poseidon mutters, not making eye contact. Just stop for supplies. Hermes eyes the bottle, going for a more radiant look this time. Bold. Especially considering the last. Don't start, Poseidon warns. You inch backward toward a display of waterproof sandals, pretending to study them while not missing a second of this drama. Hermes leans against a pillar, lazily drumming his fingers on his scroll tablet. You know, he says, I heard there's a hidden cove near Aegina. Gorgeous sand, secluded, only accessible by dolphin Uber. Your directions got me stuck in a whirlpool last time, Poseidon replies. I had seaweed in places seaweed should never be. Details, Hermes says, rolling his eyes. Historians still argue whether Mount Olympus, Mall, ever truly existed as a physical place, or was more of a metaphorical crossroads of divine commerce. Fringe mythographers suggest it might be been real, but shifted in and out of mortal visibilities, sort of like a mythical pop-up shop with questionable zoning laws. Regardless, here you are, sandwiched between two gods in a mall that smells like divine regret and half-priced ambrosia soap. Poseidon starts walking faster, clearly trying to shake Hermes, who of course follows. You know, if you just asked for beach recommendations, I did, Poseidon interrupts. From the oracle, Hermes chuckles. No, did she do the goat riddle again? That one's a classic. I hate that goat, Poseidon says, still walking. He sneezed on me. You reach a food court? It's mostly closed, except for one stall labeled Hef's Hot Coals with a grill still smoldering. A half-burned satyr nods solemnly from behind the counter. You grab a roasted fig skewer for Poseidon, hoping it might cool his temper. Hermes, undeterred, pulls up a conjured seat and plops down. Tell you what, I'll give you a real beach tip. No tricks. No whirlpools. Poseidon stops. Why? Hermes smirks. Because watching you wander around for days looking for the perfect beach is getting really old. Even Zeus made popcorn. Poseidon sighs through his nostrils, which emits a faint puff of seawater. Fine, say it. Hermes taps his scroll. West of Delos. There's a beach nobody uses. White sand, warm shallows, and 0 goats. The catch, there's always a catch. It's technically a retirement beach for ancient sea monsters. You both stare. They don't bite, Hermes says. Much, Poseidon grumbles, considers it, then snatches a free sandal sample and walks off without saying goodbye. Hermes calls after him. Tell them Hermes says hi. As you exit the mall, Poseidon mutters, next time I'm bringing Hades. He never talks. You agree silently. At least Hades doesn't recommend monster beaches. The mall disappears behind you, swallowed by a mist that probably wasn't there 5 minutes ago. Or maybe it was. Reality does weird things near divine retail spaces. Poseidon's tote bag is now stuffed with 3 bottles of Posaglo, a dried fig you think is haunted, and a sandal sample he forgot to pay for. Not that anyone dared stop him. I hate Hermes, he mutters again, but it sounds more like a ritual chant now. The kind you repeat when you know you'll fall for the same trick again next week. You're walking back toward the coast now, slightly off course again. Tay, at least Poseidon's skin looks radiant. The road winds down from the fading echoes of the Olympus Mall. Poseidon is humming to himself now, which unfortunately sounds like a deep-sea whale funeral scored by a kazoo. You do your best to match his pace, sidestepping little puddles left by his leaking tote bag. It's dribbling Posaglo like divine breadcrumbs, marking your increasingly aimless path across central Greece. So, Poseidon says after a long pause, Delos, huh? West of Delos, you clarify. Monster Beach. Retirement zone? 0 goats. He frowns thoughtfully, which on his face looks suspiciously like he's trying to remember if he left the stove on. Under the ocean. I like the 0 goats part. Monsters, though, might be awkward. You nod, thinking about the implications of lounging next to a sea serpent with arthritis, or getting into a sunchair turf war with a retired hydra. And yet, you walk on. The terrain flattens, and in the near distance, you spot something shimmering like a mirage of shimmering linen and loudly clinking armor. A band of mortal heroes is gathered near a rock formation, flexing theatrically and taking turns throwing spears at an empty olive oil amphora. Great, Poseidon mutters. Hero training camp, just what we needed. Pulls the hood of his robe up like a celebrity avoiding paparazzi, but it's useless. One of the trainees, a young man, with unnecessarily greased curls and a chest plate, several sizes too small, spots him instantly. Is that Poseidon? He gasps. Sir, great sea father?
House.
The entire camp stops. One guy drops his sword on his foot. Another tries to kneel and falls over backward into a bush. Not now, Poseidon says, holding up a hand. Beach quest. Very important. Divine matters. But the heroes swarm. All questions and starstruck, babbling. Did you really build Atlantis? Do your tridents come in different sizes? Is it true? You once turned into a dolphin to seduce a river? Poseidon blinks slowly. I regret nothing, and also that last part was Apollo. Thank you. The leader of the group steps forward, a pompous, cape-flipping type with a bronze six-pack and a name tag that reads Hero Instructor Calathrax. Lord Poseidon, he says, bowing with the flair of someone who rehearses in front of polished shields. It is our honor to offer you our finest mortal beach suggestions. We've created a short list. He pulls out a scroll that unfurls dramatically down the hillside, rolling all the way to a sheep's hooves at the base. Poseidon groans. This is going to be so dumb. And it is. The list includes Mountaintop Sand Slide, which isn't a beach. It's just a dangerous slope covered in powdered limestone. Volcanic Spa Bay, closed indefinitely due to steam explosions. The Forgotten Dunes. Forgotten for a very good reason. Scorpions. So many scorpions. And Poseidon's personal favorite, Pebble Cove. Not technically a beach, but pretty close. Historians still argue whether ancient hero academies were standardized across. Greece are more like family-run gladiator gyms with suspicious liability waivers. Some fringe theories even suggest this one was funded by Ares just to keep annoying mortals away from real wars. Poseidon sighs long and hard enough to make nearby reeds bend slightly. Heroes, he says. Always so confident, so shirtless. You spot one of the trainees holding a bottle labeled God Sweat, the ultimate performance elixir. It's glowing faintly, definitely illegal in at least 3 pantheons. As Poseidon tries to escape their company with mild politeness and a few divine glares, Calathrax walks beside you. If you're looking for beach legends, he says, there's a tale about a vanished shoreline called Thalas's Lap. Supposedly, the softest sand in the world. But it only appears under a blue moon and the sound of a lullaby. Poseidon hears this and spins around. Now that sounds fake. It is. Calathrax admits proudly. But pretty, right? You leave? Further west now, the air smells saltier, and the earth gives way to sandier paths. You spot gulls? Always a good omen or a warning, depending on the gull's mood. One of them eyes Poseidon and poops directly onto his trident. You pretend not to see, so does he. Eventually, you reach a small roadside shrine dedicated to an obscure sea nymph named Malpida. The statue is chipped, and someone's drawn a mustache on it, but the incense is still burning. Poseidon kneels. She was nice, he murmurs, and once gave me a kelp loaf when I had food poisoning. You blink? Gods get food poisoning? Oh, from mortal food? Absolutely. One time I tried moussaka that had been sitting in a sunken barge for 3 centuries. Never again. Quirky but true. Ancient Greek sailors often left food offerings at these little shrines before voyage eyes, sometimes wine, sometimes fish, occasionally weird stuff like eggs dyed with squid ink. After a moment of respect, Poseidon checks the horizon. No sign of Delos yet, but we're getting close. He pulls out a tiny compassan, enchanted one shaped like a seahorse. It spins wildly, then explodes in a tiny puff of glitter. Okay, he sighs. No shortcuts. We're going old school. Following the goals. Are you sure they're not just circling a fishing boat? Don't ruin this for me. As the sun begins to dip and turn the clouds gold and lavender, you walk in silence, each of you lost in thought. Poseidon hums, again still mournful, still weirdly kazoo adjacent. You find yourself thinking about the beach again. Not the logistics, not the monsters, not even the goat. Just the idea of it. Somewhere out there, there is a perfect patch of sand. Probably, maybe. At least there is a patch where no one will try to hand you a scroll or a seafood-based energy drink. Poseidon stops suddenly and points to a weathered wooden sign. This way to the beach of slightly above-average warmth, you both stare. You ask. Only one way to find out, he says, marching forward. The gulls scream overhead like ancient grandmothers yelling in ancient Greek. The trail winds downward toward the coast, the path marked by increasingly unhinged signs. Beach ahead. Not technically cursed. You're almost there, turn back, if allergic to shellfish. Officially goat-free since last Thursday. Poseidon walks with the solemn dignity of someone trying to pretend this is all still very normal. His sandals squish slightly, his tote bag still dripping. Paseglo from earlier in the sea air hits with a briny slap across the face. You follow close behind, dodging the occasional rogue crab that scuttles out of a bush like it has something to prove. The landscape begins to shimmer with that peculiar light you only get near ancient waters. Olive trees bow over the path, their leaves whispering in a language that probably isn't Greek, but maybe just ancient sarcasm. The coastline finally comes into view, and you pause. Because this beach, well, it's technically a beach. The sand is mostly crushed shell dust. The shoreline is scattered with sun-bleached seaweed shaped like question marks. And there, gently bobbing just offshore, is a single elderly sea monster, wearing a wide straw hat and floating on an inflatable clam. Poseidon stares. You stare. The sea monster raises a flipper in what is either a greeting or a vague threat. Poseidon squints. Is that Glarathon? The monster turns and squints back. Posaboy, it croaks. You still haven't returned my hair comb from 482 BC? Historians still argue whether sea monsters like Glarathon were metaphorical representations of chaos or just literal old. Aquatic beings with bad tempers and excellent memory. Fringe scholars insist some of them founded ancient sponge cooperatives off the coast of Cyprus. Is this the monster beach Hermes meant? You ask. Poseidon sighs. Looks like it. Glarathon, retired after losing a sandcastle contest to a bunch of naiads, refused to leave ever since. You walk slowly across the gritty shore, your feet sinking into sand that smells like faintly spoiled perfume and salt. There's a wooden sign stuck in the ground next to a tilted umbrella. Welcome to Sleepy Shell Cove. All retired horrors welcome. Poseidon kicks the sign lightly. This place has potential. Needs a few volcanic vents. Maybe a whirlpool. Bit of flair. Rustling draws your attention to the dunes behind you. And out waddles another monster, this one shaped like a spiraling eel wearing what appears to be very tiny sunglasses. Beach time. It declares in a voice like wet parchment. Is it Tuesday? It's fish stick day, right? No, Morbliss, Glarathon calls from the water. It's Friday. Now means kelp pudding. Oh no, Morbliss moans. I can't digest pudding anymore. Poseidon puts both hands on his hips and sighs. This is going to be a long detour. You find a rock to sit on. Well, it turns out to be a giant fossilized barnacle, but close enough in, take in the scene. There's a broken volleyball net. Cracked conch shell radio is playing some kind of siren jazz. One monster is chasing a beach ball. It clearly has no intention of catching. It's tranquil, in that end-of-the-world seaside nursing home sort of way. He lays out a fish scale towel from his bag, sets up a mini trident holder, and awkwardly applies a dab of Paseglo to his temples. So, he says to no one in particular, this is it. Beach achieved. Quest complete. Glarathon swims to shore with a sloshing sigh and drags himself onto the sand. You staying long? Maybe, Poseidon mutters. Just needed a quiet place. Stretch my legs. Scream into the tide, maybe. You're 2 coves too far north for the screaming rocks, says Morbliss helpfully. They echo your rage beautifully. Good to know, Poseidon replies. You look around, surprised at how cozy the place feels now. The monsters, for all their terrible reputations, are mostly just squishy, ancient creatures trying to get by. One of them something that looks like an octopus, but walks like a spider, shuffles over, and offers you a kelp smoothie. You sip. It tastes like blended aquarium, but in a comforting way. Poseidon finally lies back and sighs. This isn't the beach I imagined, he admits. What was the beach you imagined, you ask? He's quiet a moment then. Something with pristine white sand. A sea breeze that sings. Maybe a dolphin massage station. Fewer existentially tired monsters. You shrug. Sometimes the beach picks you. He groans. You've been talking to Hermes again, haven't you? Just then, there's a fluttering sound overhead. A scroll parachutes down, tied with golden thread. Poseidon catches it midair. The seal is unmistakable. Hermes' smirking face stamped in wax. He opens it, reads grunts. What's it say, you ask? Knew you'd end up there? Try the crab bake hut. Order the moon-dusted scallops. Also, sunscreen. He flips it over. That's my tote bag now. You both look down. Sure enough, the tote bag is gone. In its place, a paper, Hermes brand takeaway bag with 3 kelp cookies and a small note. You're welcome. Poseidon lets out a sound somewhere between a defeated groan and a chuckle. He's insufferable, but helpful. You both sit in silence, watching the sun hang low over the gentle waves. The monsters have settled into their evening routines, card games with slippery decks, floating meditation circles, and something that may or may not be synchronized, gurgling. It's peaceful in its own weird way. Not the beach of dreams, but maybe the beach of pause, of in-between, ridiculous detours, and ancient kelp pudding. Poseidon digs his trident into the sand and finally relaxes his shoulders. I might stay the night, he says. You nod, sinking a little deeper into your seat barnacle. The moon peeks out, faint and dusty. And off in the distance, the faintest echo of Hermes laughing. You wake up to the sound of what can only be described as a grumpy sea roar yawn. Poseidon is stretching his arms out toward the horizon like he's doing underwater yoga, and several nearby monsters are already shuffling through their beach. Routines, screening their scales, adjusting their floaties and complaining about today's seaweed. Density like retirees discussing barometric pressure. You, meanwhile, have spent the night curled under a towel that smells vaguely of pickled clams. Poseidon stands, brushing bits of shell dust from his robe. All right, he says, this has been nice, but I think I've recovered enough from the mall fiasco to keep looking. You blink blearily. You're leaving? This place has pudding. I'm Poseidon, he says, adjusting the tiny sunglasses Morbliss gifted him. I'm not meant to stagnate on a beach. I am the beach. Which is technically not true, but you let it slide. Before you can protest further, Glarathon shuffles over holding a rusted conch shell on a chain. Take this, he growls. It's a sea pass. We'll get you through the tides of bureaucracy. Poseidon raises an eyebrow. Still enforcing border tides? Unfortunately, Glarathon says, sighing. Ever since the Cyclopes started that shell export racket, everything's tighter now. Historians still argue whether the Cyclopes were actual bureaucrats or simply the first tax auditors to weaponize a clipboard. There is debate over a so-called Cyclopean permitting code found scratched into a chunk of obsidian that reads, Forma 34. Request for rock stacking near sacred waters. Poseidon pockets the shell, gives Glarathon a gruff nod, and starts walking. You follow. The two of you trudge inland, away from the sleepy murmur of retired monsters, and toward a jagged coastline that looks suspiciously like it might contain sentient cliffs. The signs return, each more cryptic than the last. Next beach. Wave pattern inconsistent. Enter at your own tide. Caution, singing mollusks ahead. Poseidon mutters. Last time I dealt with singing mollusks, I had to apologize to a princess. Twice. You don't ask. Dead. You're distracted by the sound of rapid clicking like castanets being played by an anxious squirrel. Crabs. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all arranged in strange geometric patterns along the sand. They're holding tiny tools. Coral pliers, driftwood hammers, sea glass measuring sticks. Poseidon freezes. Oh no, it's the guild. You squint. The what? The Architectural Crustacean Guild of Coastal Engineering and Ritual Claw Design, or a CGCERCD. That's the worst acronym I've ever heard. You're very sensitive about it. A large crab with a monocle scuttles forward, holding a clipboard made of pressed kelp. Greetings, Cyanide Poseidon, it clicks formally. According to bylaw Shell Point Gamma, you've entered a restricted beechcraft zone. Poseidon blinks. I'm not here to build anything. You are always building something, the crab snaps. And it's not wrong. The god has a bit of a reputation. He is the divine equivalent of someone who says they read just fixing the deck and ends up adding a second story, a hot tub, and a moon observatory. You step forward. Oh. We're looking for a simple beach. No waves that scream. No god-tier real estate development. Just sand, water, quiet. The monocled crab tilts its head. Simple. You want Spartalos Bay. Poseidon frowns. That sounds familiar. It should. It's the site of your first failed beach design. You tried to mix marble tiles with shifting sand. People kept slipping and yelling very undivine things. Poseidon cringes. Oh, right. The sandals incident. Historians still argue whether Spartalos Bay was meant as a leisure space or an ambitious attempt at combining a royal amphitheater with a saltwater foot spa. Fringe documents describe an opening ceremony that ended with 12 sprained ankles and one surprisingly aggressive dolphin protest. But it's quiet now. The crab continues. No one goes there. You may find what you're seeking less. Of course you plan to build again. Poseidon holds up both hands. No building. Swear it on my. Trident's left hind. The crab nods slowly. Very well. Proceed. But beware the administrative tide pools. They have opinions. As you pass, a small crab taps out a sarcastic drum roll with bits of coral. The landscape changes once again, this time turning flatter, bleached under the noonday sun. The air feels thicker. Even the waves seem to approach more cautiously, as if checking whether they're about to be repurposed into a bathhouse. Eventually, you crest a hill, and there it is. Sparthouse Bay. It's shockingly normal. A crescent of sand, silver and soft. A few tide pools glint in the sun. One old beach umbrella flaps in the wind like it's lived 1,000 lifetimes. You hear nothing but distant gulls and the rhythmic hush of the sea. Poseidon stands there a moment, hands on hips. This might actually be it, he says. You both walk down to the water's edge. The tide rolls in and out, obedient and unbothered, removes his sandals, steps into the surf, and lets out a deep sigh. Then he says the thing that surprises you most. I don't want to be Poseidon here. You glance over. You want to be someone else? He nods, just a guy on a beach. Maybe with a smoothie, maybe with some light existential questioning. Nothing divine. And for a moment, he is just that. No gods, no quests. It's just a tired man with salt in his beard and sand between his toes. You sit beside him, letting the sun toast your shoulders. It's quiet. It's still. It's wait. Something is bubbling. Poseidon turns just in time to see a tide pool wink at him, not glisten. Wink, a tiny watery voice echoes. We have notes, he groans. I forgot the tide pools are sentient here. You both get up, dusting yourselves off. It was close. So close. But you're not done searching. Poseidon sighs again. Next beach. You nod. And the journey continues. You find yourself once again walking beside Poseidon, whose trident now doubles as a walking stick, a sand rake, and moments ago, a very ineffective umbrella stand. The search resumes, though with less optimism and more of a resigned beach hopper energy. Like to travel vloggers, who forgot to check tide schedules and are now spiritually sunburned. The map Hermes provided has begun to fade at the edges, the ink blurred by sea mist and cookie crumbs. Poseidon holds it up against the sunlight, squinting like someone trying to interpret ancient tax code through a wet kaleidoscope. So you ask, what's the next potential spot? He tilts the map. It looks like a beach called Los Saint Sands, or possibly Tranquil Lard. The ink smudged. I'm going to hope it's the first one. You veer toward a narrow path flanked by low dunes and clumps of seagrass. The air feels still here, the kind of still that makes your ears feel like they're missing something. No gulls, no wind, just the faint rustle of tiny creatures who'd prefer you weren't here. You pass a sign carved into driftwood. Welcome to Tranquilos Sands. Do not disturb the sand. Below it, in much smaller letters, seriously, don't. Poseidon rolls his eyes. Is this one of those beaches run by? Yep, says a voice from nowhere. It's a dryad siren cope. A head rises from the sand, blinking grains out of her eyes. She's wearing sunglasses made of oyster shell halves, her hair braided with seaweed and what looks like small cinnamon sticks. I'm Glissa, she says, yawning. I do beach vibe management. You're tracking sand. Poseidon lifts one foot now, thoroughly coated in sand crust. It's a beach. Yeah, but this sand is sacred. It's layered in 42 emotional tones. It remembers everything. You blink? Everything? Glissa repeats, pointing to the ground. That patch over there is still mad about someone stealing a towel in 776 BC. Fringe scholars love Tranquilo Sands. Some argue that its emotionally resonant sand layers recorded the thoughts of beachgoers through centuries of tiny quartz vibrations. One theory claims the sand once shouted at a Spartan general until he cried and invented sandals. Poseidon folds his arms. We just need a place to relax. No drama, no memory sand. Glyssa shrugs. You can stay. But only if you participate in the cleansing ceremony. You hesitate. Poseidon groans. How long is it? she replies cheerfully, not including the gratitude circle or the underwater forgiveness chant. He looks at you utterly deadpan. Absolutely not. And that's how you find yourselves politely tiptoeing backwards out of a hyper-emotional beach that, as you later find out, files grievances through seafoam. Back on the trail, you pass a broken sign. Next, beach of sighs, don't mind the wind. The path winds upward now, climbing a craggy ridge with sharp views of the coast. Far below, you can see flashes of blue and white, the surf endlessly folding over itself. Poseidon stops to catch his breath, not from exhaustion, but possibly from mounting disappointment. You know, he mutters, I could have just built one, a perfect beach. Custom-made. So why didn't you? He pauses. I think. I needed to find something I didn't shape. Something that wasn't me. Just ... a place. Not a symbol. Not a statement. You nod. And instead you got a beach that remembers spilled juice boxes. He laughs quietly. Soon you reach the crest of the ridge and find a small marker. A polished shell embedded in a stone cairn. It hums faintly when Poseidon touches it. The air shifts. Below is a soft, sloping shore, tucked between cliffs like it's trying not to be seen. The wind swirls in slow spirals, brushing against your cheeks like the sighs of ancient gods who've stopped caring what anyone thinks. The sand is pale, fine, almost iridescent. The waves don't crash, they whisper. This, Poseidon says softly, feels right. You descend, slowly, reverently. Even your footsteps seem quieter here. As you near the water, you spot a lone figure standing ankle-deep in the tide. It turns. It's a satyr. It's wearing board shorts. Yo, he says casually. You guys vibing or intruding? Little of both, Poseidon replies. This a public beach? Technically? Yeah, but the locals, well, it's more of a shared melancholia situation. You gotta bring your own longing. You're pretty sure that's a joke. Mostly, Poseidon steps into the surf. It swirls around his calves, and for a moment, he doesn't look like the god of the sea. He just looks tired, peaceful, listening. This place has a name, you ask. The satyr nods. Locals call it the beach that forgets. People come here when they're ready to let go of something. You glance at Poseidon, whose expression has gone unreadably still. What kind of things, you ask? Usually grief, regret, embarrassing festival dances, when someone left behind a failed cookbook. Historians still argue whether the beach that forgets is real or a metaphor invented by late Hellenistic poets, who were deeply into mood lighting and sea-based metaphors. Some fringe thinkers claim the tide here causes mild amnesia, while others believe the sand literally absorbs memories like emotional, silly putty. Poseidon turns back to you, blinking against the wind. I could stay here, he says quietly. Just let it all out. Let it go. You sit down beside him. The sand is cool, soft, the kind that forms no castles, only ripples. You ask, would that be giving up? He shakes his head. No, maybe, just resting. The satyr, now halfway into a philosophical beach nap, raises one hand lazily. You can leave things here if you want. It doesn't ask questions. Poseidon pulls something from his robe, Paquita's small conch shell, blackened with time. He turns it over in his hand, then gently places it into the tide. It floats for a moment, then vanishes beneath the waves. And somehow, he's a little lighter, he sighs. The beach sighs with him. You sit there not speaking while the sea forgets in slow rhythmic waves. Poseidon doesn't say anything for a long while. The tide continues its lazy work, erasing footprints and offering no commentary. You'd think a god would be immune to nostalgia or burnout, but here he is trident, planted in the sand, looking like someone who just deleted an old voicemail he'd been saving for years. Eventually, he exhales, long and low, like he's wringing out centuries of pressure. That was a beach worth visiting, he says. I still haven't found my beach. You glance over. What would your beach even look like? He raises an eyebrow. Peaceful, simple. Maybe some weird rock formations. Nothing that sings or remembers or demands ceremonial chanting. Reasonable, and no giant crabs with zoning permits. You both laugh, which feels good. Necessary. Like clearing emotional cobwebs. You move on. The path takes you through a forest of leaning palms and whispering reeds where every breeze feels like a shared secret. A wooden sign hangs crookedly on a bent reed. Welcome to beach number 9. All others before this were a test. Sounds humble, you mumble. Poseidon scratches his chin. This one might be worth the effort. The two of you emerge from the reeds to find a beach that looks entirely ordinary. Golden sand, soft surf, a couple of weathered driftwood logs scattered like casual punctuation. A lone kite stuck in a tree flutters like it gave up on being whimsical years ago. Then you hear it. A tiny voice. You have an appointment? You glance down. A small tortoise wearing a clipboard strapped to its back blinks up at you from the sand. Poseidon sighs. Let me guess. Booking system? The tortoise nods. Beach number 9 is high demand. Only the emotionally available may enter. I'm a literal sea god, Poseidon says. And I'm a tortoise with tenure, the creature replies without missing a beat. Rules are rules. You crouch down. What kind of appointment are we talking here? Like mood-based scheduling? The tortoise squints at Poseidon. Have you done your introspective shell reflection this week? Poseidon blinks. My what? Thought so, the tortoise says, and waddles slowly away into the reeds, muttering about emotional blockages and shell-to-sand ratios. Historians still argue whether beach number 9 was an actual beach or a metaphorical staging ground for soul readiness. Described in some ancient scrolls as a liminal sun place where even the gods were made to queue. One fragment suggests an oracle once waited there so long she accidentally invented patience. You walk away before the tortoise decides you need an exit survey. By now, Poseidon is muttering to himself. Why are these beaches all run by talking animals or sentient concepts? Can T.I. just find a stupid stretch of sand and be left alone for 5 minutes? A crab in the distance raises a claw as if to object, then thinks better of it. You keep walking. Eventually, you reach a cliff overlook where the path splits. One sign points left. Shelly Cove. Excellent for yelling into the wind. The other points right. Sun's News Beach. Bring your own nap, Poseidon groans. Even the signage is trying too hard now. You go right. Sun's News Beach is everything the name promises. It's just getting there feels like a yawn made physical muffled waves, thick warm air, and seagulls so relaxed they don't even bother stealing snacks. A pair of dolphins glide by lazily, one of them wearing a sleep mask. You find a shaded patch beneath a squat sun-bleached tree. Poseidon flops down like a man who's finally admitted he's tired. He doesn't speak for a long time. Neither do you. You just sit. The breeze rocks the branches gently. Waves roll in with soft, hiccuping sighs. Far in the distance, you hear someone playing a pan flute, very badly, possibly underwater. And just when you think this beach might be the one, a shadow passes overhead. You look up. A winged horse. Poseidon squints. Is that Pegasus? Pegasus lands awkwardly, like he skipped leg day. He whinnies once and begins nosing at Poseidon-esque robes with the desperate energy of someone trying to cash in a favor. Poseidon groans. I knew I left something unfinished. Turns out, Pegasus has been flying aimlessly since the Big Splash Games of 301 BCE, still waiting for Poseidon to judge his cannonball form. You can't make this up. Poseidon stands, brushing sand off his tunic. All right, I'll tell him you won. Gosh, just get him to stop licking my scrolls. The horse snorts and starts eating a palm frond. Mission accomplished. Fringe theorists have long speculated that Pegasus's origin story was Poseidon, his way of creating a travel pet that could also fetch coconuts. Some even argue that Pegasus was originally meant to be aquatic, with wings purely decorative, until a tragic miscommunication involving seaweed. Once Pegasus takes off, now proudly carrying a small ribbon Poseidon conjures for lifetime achievement in aerial splashing peace returns. Poseidon sinks back down. I don't think I'll ever find it, he says quietly, at the beach. You nudge him gently. Maybe it's not a single beach. Maybe it's all of them. The weird ones, the loud ones, the haunted ones, even the crabby ones. He smiles at that. You lean back, letting the heat of the sun soak through your bones. For a moment, you could stay here forever. And then, because of course a tree you're under slowly opens one eye. Nap time is over, it says, yawning loudly. Poseidon groans. You've got to be kidding me, you're not. It's time to move again. Back on your feet again, you trudge alongside Poseidon, as the sand gives way to crushed shell paths. He kicks a chunk of coral with an almost childish frustration. Is it just me, or are beaches more sentient than they used to be? Definitely more talkative, you reply. You think this is Zeus' idea of a prank? Poseidon grunts. If it were Zeus, the beaches would be louder, flashier, and somehow involve goats. You walk in silence for a while, the crunch of shell beneath your sandals mixing with the hiss of surf far off to your right. A salt-sweet breeze drifts by, carrying the faint scent of kelp and overcooked seaweed chips. Eventually, another sign comes into view, nailed to a leaning post made from an ancient paddleboard. Beach of Eternal Picnics. Abandon. All cleanliness, the who enter Poseidon groans. A fat seagull waddles out from behind a dune, squawks, and disappears into a pile of sandwich wrappers that might have once been civilization. You glance over a ridge and immediately recoil. The whole beach is sticky. Sun-bleached towels stretch in every direction. Beach umbrellas flap like defeated flags. Half-buried coolers leak suspicious liquid, and children chase each other with watermelon slices the size of shields. In the center of it all, a giant, unending potluck table where satyrs, nymphs, and a few confused philosophers argue about tzatziki recipes, and supervising the entire spectacle. A centaur in mirrored sunglasses, holding a clipboard and a megaphone. Welcome to the Beach of Eternal Picnics. He yells at you with unnatural enthusiasm. You'll be staying for 12 to 14 centuries. No, we won't, Poseidon says flatly. Try some dip. The centaur calls, pointing to a bowl that is visibly smoking. It's fermented ambrosia with hummus undertones. You both back away carefully, avoiding an enthusiastic nymph who is trying to hand out pineapple skewers that may or may not be sentient. Historians still argue whether this beach emerged from an ancient hospitality curse, or if it simply grew from an overambitious harvest festival that never got cleaned up. Some believe it was Hera's Ideum, eternal celebration of family. Others suggest Dionysus just forgot to end a party. You're halfway out of the snack zone when a goat in sunglasses spits at you. Possibly a metaphor. Poseidon is quiet again. He's clearly over it. Do I even like beaches anymore? He mutters. You glance at him. Maybe you re-just looking for a beach that Dos and T need anything from you, that lands harder than you expect. He stops. You might be right, he says. I created oceans, storms, islands, but I never just went somewhere to be. Till now you offer. He nods slowly, but what if I've become too noticeable? Maybe the beach I need won't show up until I stop being Poseidon. Bold plan, you say. You gonna disguise yourself as a fisherman again? That worked super well last time? Hey, he shrugs. At least I caught that mythically large mackerel. You remember it? It tried to unionize. Eventually the trail winds inland. A change of scenery. Its dense forest closes around you. A hush falls, broken only by birds arguing about worm ownership. Poseidon seems lighter now, almost amused. Like he's accepted that perfection may not be the goal. You emerge into a clearing and spot a dock. It's old warped wood, seaweed draped over the planks like lazy garlands. A faded sign hangs from a bent post. Next boat to somewhere you didn't expect. Departs whenever. Poseidon reads it aloud, grins. Sounds promising. A single rowboat bobs gently at the end of the dock. No oars, no captain. Just an empty seat and a tiny brass plaque that reads, Trust the tide. You both climb in. The boat begins to drift slowly at first, then with more purpose, like it knows exactly where it's going. The shoreline falls away behind you. The water is glassy and calm, reflecting a pale violet sky despite it being mid-afternoon. Poseidon leans back. You know, I could have flown, or teleported, or summoned a sea turtle taxi. Yeah, but this way it's got vibes, he chuckles. I hate that I agree. A pod of dolphins swims by in a V formation, one wearing a tiny crown. Poseidon waves. The dolphin salutes. You drift for what feels like an hour or a lifetime. The boat hums faintly, like it's singing a lullaby for sea-weary souls. Then land. It's not a big island, more like a shy lump of sand and grass, nestled in a bay you swear wasn't on the map before. No sign, no seagulls, no talking tortoises or pan-flute emergencies, just sand, water, breeze, and quiet. Poseidon steps out first, tests the ground. It doesn't whisper, doesn't remember. It just is. You walk together up the tiny dune. From the top, you can see both sides of the island. One edge has calm surf, the other, lazy lagoon. In between, scattered rocks, a few driftwood logs, and a tree that might be an olive or might be inventing a new type of fruit just for fun. Poseidon looks around, eyes scanning every simple detail. He doesn't say anything at first. Then, I think this is it. You nod. No crab permits. No guilt-ridden sand. No performance art dolphins. He exhales, and it sounds like peace. Fringe historians, especially the ones who wear robes ironically, have long believed in the existence of a hidden island known only to lost gods. A place that appears only when you stop seeking, when your sandals are worn through, and your expectations finally give up. Some call it Thalassia, others just call it enough. You watch Poseidon sit down, plant his trident in the sand beside him, and let the waves inch toward his toes. He doesn't command them. He just listens. And for the first time since you started this whole journey, he looks like someone who might actually fall asleep. Time stretches. Poseidon doesn't speak. You don't either. You both just exist, which in a world of overly metaphorical beaches, surprisingly aggressive goats, and centuries of divine responsibility feels downright revolutionary. You lie back on the soft sand. It's warm, not too warm. No prickly grains sticking to your skin. No random beach DJ dropping heavy harp remixes in the distance. Just that perfect hush, the one where even your thoughts seem to slow down and take their shoes off. Then Poseidon does something surprising. He laughs. Not his usual thunderclap of a laugh. No trident shaking tremor. Just a soft, almost human chuckle that bubbles up from somewhere deep. You glance over. Something funny. I was just thinking, he says, about all those temples. All those prayers. People begging me for calm seas, full nets, vengeance over a minor insult from a cousin. He rolls onto his side and props his head on his arm. But no one ever just asked me where I liked to swim. You blink? Not once. He shrugs. Not that I can remember. It's possible someone tried, but they probably phrased it like a metaphor and I ignored it. That tracks. Historians still debate whether gods like Poseidon were genuinely invested in human affairs, or just bored and easily flattered. Ancient records from Mycenaean seafarers show both offerings of gold and very specific critiques about storm scheduling. One carved tablet reads, "Dear Sea Lord, we gave you olives. Please stop flinging squid at our boats." Poseidon sits up slowly, brushes sand off his arm. Maybe that's what I've been circling this whole time. It's not a perfect beach, just a quiet moment where no one needs me to be anything. You nod. An escape hatch from the expectations. He smiles. Exactly. As if the island is listening. And honestly, it might be. A soft rain begins to fall. Not a storm. Not a test. It's just a warm, lazy drizzle that feels like the sea is trying to hug you back. Poseidon tilts his head back and lets it beat on his face. I forgot how much I like rain that isn't trying to prove a point. You shelter under a scraggly little tree that looks like it was drawn by someone who's only vaguely heard of trees. Its leaves make the perfect rhythm, a drowsy tick-a-tick-a-tick that sets your heartbeat to half speed. A curious creature peeks out from behind a rock, a fuzzy, sleepy-eyed thing with four paws and what looks like a monocle made of kelp. It observes you for a moment, then goes back to its nap. No questions, no judgment. You feel a little jealous? Poseidon finds a tide pool ringed with smooth stones and settles in beside it. This, he says softly, feels like something worth remembering. Not myth-worthy, you tease. Oh, the bards would skip this part entirely, he says. No epic battles, no thunderous declarations, just me in a puddle, contemplating absolutely nothing, which might be exactly why it matters. You sit beside him. The tide pool is shallow but rich with detail. Tiny snails leaving swirls behind them, crabs peeking out like nervous introverts at a party. And a flickering school of fish the size of your thumbnail practicing synchronized swimming like it is their Olympic tryout. And you notice Poseidon watching it all with the kind of stillness usually reserved for statues and overworked baristas. You know what this beach doesn't have? He says, voice barely above the wind. What a name. He's right. No carved stones, no scrolls, no pompous declarations. Just sand, water, and time. What should we call it, you ask? Poseidon considers this for a long while. So long you wonder if he's fallen asleep with his eyes open. Then, we shouldn't, he smiles. Let it stay unnamed. That way, it won't start having expectations. You chuckle. Smart. You know, the minute you name a beach, it starts getting personality, or trying to rent itself out for weddings, he adds. The rain slows to a whisper, and eventually stops altogether. The last drops fall from the leaves above like punctuation marks on the silence. A warm wind picks up, and with it, the soft scent of salt, and something faintly floral, possibly imaginary jasmine. Poseidon leans back on his elbows. I used to think being a god meant being in control, that the sea was only mine if I kept it tamed, boxed, charted, he exhales. Now I think, maybe I was just trying to keep me boxed. Fringe theorists have always loved Poseidon's so-called quiet years, periods of mythological inactivity where he seemingly vanished from the historical record. Some believe he was in exile. Others say he was sleeping beneath the waves. But there's a growing camp that thinks maybe, just maybe, he was sitting on a tiny, nameless island, listening to the tide pool snails and letting himself not be Poseidon. You think you'll stay here? You ask quietly. Poseidon doesn't answer right away. Then, maybe for a while. Maybe longer. I don't know. He tilts his head toward you. But I think I'll miss our walking disasters. You smile. Yeah, me too. Even the yelling beach. He chuckles. Especially the yelling beach. You both lie back and watch the clouds. They're shaped like nothing in particular, which feels right. And as the light begins to shift, just a little like the sun is adjusting its pillow, you realize something. The journey was never about the beach. It was about permission to rest, to stop performing, to shed titles and temples and just be. Poseidon seems to sense it too. Ass! His trident now lies beside him, half buried in sand, forgotten, or maybe forgiven. The tide pool bubbles once, and the island, if it could smile, probably just did. The sky melts into a pastel haze, no thunder, no fanfare, just the sun shifting to late afternoon like a sleepy cat curling into its favorite spot. Poseidon lets out a soft sea breeze sigh. You do too. You know, he says, I've ruled oceans, summoned tempests, wrestled krakens shaped like taxes. But I don't think I've ever felt this calm. You nod, your arms folded behind your head as you lie in the sand. Wow, it's weirdly nice not being yelled at by weather for a change, he chuckles. Or asked for a miracle every 5 minutes. You both stare at the sky. A single cloud shaped like a chicken drumstick floats overhead. Probably not symbolic. Probably. After a while, he sits up, brushing the sand off his arms. The trident beside him has stopped humming entirely, like it too has gone offline. You ever wonder, he says slowly, if gods were just ideas that got too popular? You blink. Go on, I mean. What is a god? Really? Power? Sure. Mystery that helps. But most of all, I think it's repetition. People keep telling a story until the story becomes real. Till they believe it so hard, they build temples. And after a few centuries, you're not a person anymore. You're a job. Historians still argue whether that's exactly what happened, you say, thinking aloud. If the Olympians were once just archetypes, embodied metaphors that somehow hired agents, Poseidon laughs, then groans. Ugh, don't say agents. Brings back that whole era where Hermes tried to get me brand deals. Poseidon's premium pickled anchovies. Nightmare, you wince. Yikes. The wind picks up slightly, brushing over your skin like a lullaby with good timing. Birds call overhead, soft and slow, as if even they respect the mood. Poseidon walks toward the edge of the island where driftwood collects in a crescent, finds a sturdy piece, picks it up, and begins idly carving something into the sand with the tip. Not his name, just a spiral. One continuous curve that goes inward. Simple, quiet, hypnotic. You sit beside him. Do you miss Olympus? You ask. He considers the question, digging his toe into the sand. Sometimes the view, the ridiculous feasts, that one hallway that smelled like golden cinnamon for no reason, a beat, but mostly, no. It was loud and heavy, like wearing a crown that pinches all the time. You nod. So what now? He smiles. Maybe I let myself be forgotten for a bit. Let the myths fade. Let someone else worry about how many dolphins is too many dolphins. A pause. Historians still argue about when you first disappeared, you muse. Some say it was after a seaquake that swallowed a city whole. Others think you walked into a beach cave and just never came out. He grins. Maybe I just took a nap and nobody noticed, honestly. Yeah, that sounds more plausible than most of the surviving records. You both sit there in companionable silence. Time doesn't move here in the usual way. It stretches like warm taffy, like bedtime stories that always add one more thing. Poseidon pulls out a shell, a perfectly symmetrical Ocean's World thing, and balances it on a rock. I think I'll leave that there, he says. In case someone else stumbles onto this place and wonders if it's real, you glance at him. I'll probably build a shrine to it. He snorts. Then I'll curse them with itchy sandals. As the sun tilts further toward the horizon, the island begins to shift its mood again. Not physically, just emotionally. Softer. Slower. Like a beach that knows bedtime is coming and doesn't want to wake the neighbors. Poseidon lies back down and covers his eyes with his forearm. Wake me if the tide invents jazz. You rest nearby, listening to the waves flirt with the shore. One rolls in with a sound like someone exhaling through a seashell. Another sounds like a harp trying to fall asleep. Somewhere in the foliage, a creature snores. You hope it never stops. Poseidon stirs just enough to say, I think this is what peace feels like. Not very marketable. You murmur, he grins. Exactly. As evening slides into position, the island glows with the kind of soft, golden light you usually see on the cover of fantasy novels that end in hugs. The clouds blush slightly. The air smells like warm rocks and a memory you didn't know you had. You roll onto your side and watch the tide again. There's no sign of a boat, no path out, no metaphysical exit ramp. Just the feeling that this is where the story was always headed. Poseidon, once the temperamental ruler of oceans, now a man with sand in his hair and no pressing obligations. You, once a wandering companion, now a witness to something better than epic. Stillness. I used to think I had to earn rest, Poseidon murmurs. But now, I think maybe. Rest is where the god parts end and the human parts begin. That lands with the weight of myth and the softness of driftwood. The tide comes a little closer and you let it. You wake slowly not because of noise, but because the stillness feels so complete that your brain starts nudging you like, hey, are we okay? This feels suspiciously good. Poseidon's already up, standing knee-deep in the water. The sunrise casts a ridiculous gold aura around him, like he's in the opening credits of an inspirational documentary about inner peace and recycled kelp. He's not doing anything dramatic, just standing there, staring at the horizon like he's waiting for it to blink. He glances back and smiles. Morning. If that's still what this is, you yawn. Feels like morning. Alice, the sky's just lying again. He chuckles. Wouldn't be the first time. The water around him is glass flat. No tides pulling, no storms whispering threats, no moody sea serpents rehearsing passive-aggressive monologues. Just a quiet so deep, you can almost hear your own thoughts lining up to be acknowledged. You walk over and step in next to him. The water's warm. Perfect. Not a temperature you can really describe, just one your skin immediately agrees with. Poseidon exhales. This is the first time I've stood in the sea and not felt it asking anything of me. You nod, watching a jellyfish drift by, glowing faintly like a lazy light bulb, not asking for control, or miracles, or poetry. Exactly just letting me float. Historians still argue whether Poseidon's emotional detachment from the sea began during the decline of Greek maritime power, or if it was a post-Olympian phase, something like divine burnout. Fringe records mention odd behavior Poseidon refusing to answer prayers or leaving cryptic graffiti on shipwrecks that read, "Gone surfing. Don't wait up." He slowly crouches down until his arms float beside him. It's strange. All those centuries of dominion. And now I think the ocean never needed me. It just liked having a mascot. You raise an eyebrow. You're saying you were a CM'd brand ambassador? It's more like a glorified weather app with delusions of grandeur. You both laugh, the kind of slow, easy laugh that feels like it was growing in the background for days before finally blooming. A school of fish swims between your legs, perfectly timed, effortless. No panic, no destination, just the natural motion of things. not in a hurry. You stay like that for a while, floating, standing, not saying much. Eventually Poseidon straightens and walks back up the beach. That's it, you follow. He finds a piece of charcoal-colored driftwood and begins sketching something into the sand. It's abstract, sort of. A series of lines and loops that don't spell anything, but somehow feel like a goodbye. You don't ask what it means. Instead, you sit cross-legged, watching him, the way one might watch a tree finally sway after hours of stillness. You know what I never did? Says suddenly, without looking up. What apologize to who? He gestures vaguely. Everyone, sailors, dolphins. That one demigod I turned into coral, Arshia. I thought it was poetic at the time. He dusts his hands off, staring at the etching. I always thought being a god meant being unapologetic, untouchable, but now he doesn't finish. He doesn't have to. Because the wind changes. It's subtle, a shift in direction, a new softness to the air. He smiles. I think the sea forgives me. You glance out at the horizon. The water pulses in and out, smooth and even, like it's breathing. The island doesn't speak. It doesn't need to. It's in that pause, that breath between waves, that you realize something important. You could leave now. This place has no gates, no magical rules, no weird old guy in a canoe demanding riddles, just a kind of earned stillness. Poseidon seems to sense the shift in you. You thinking of going? You hesitate. Maybe there's this feeling like I've seen what I came to see. He nods slowly. I get it. You staying? He smiles softly, at least until I forget how to spell my own name. A long pause. Then he says, promise me something? Sure, if anyone asks where I went, just tell them the truth. You tilt your head, which is that I found a beach with no name, and I finally stopped trying to rule it. That sticks in your chest a little, like a smooth stone you might keep in your pocket. You rise and start to walk. There's no path, just the sense of one. Behind you, Poseidon watches, not sad, not expectant, just present. And as you reach the edge of the beach, the place where the sand starts to forget your footsteps, you glance back one last time. Poseidon raises his hand in a casual wave. You raise yours back. And then, like a dream, you finally let fade after remembering the best part. The beach softens around you. The light bends just enough. The sound of the ocean lulls you forward, and you walk on, not out of the story, just into the next quieter chapter. The beach behind you dissolves slowly like a memory you re not quite ready to let go of but don't need to carry anymore. You walk forward, even though the path isn't visible. The sand gives way to cool rock, then dappled moss, then something softer still. There's no map, no signs, no mythical GPS chirping from your pocket, just intuition. That hush in your chest that says, this way. The air here smells different. Not salty, but green like riverbanks and old gardens and forgotten fountains. And the light? It's gentler now, tinted with a bluish-silver glow that feels like evening folded in velvet. You pause for a second to listen. Behind you, the whisper of waves. Ahead, nothing but quiet. And then, faintly, the plunk of dripping water. The gentle creak of old trees stretching. Somewhere a breeze hums a note so low and steady, it might as well be the universe exhaling. You keep walking, and it occurs to you this whole place may not be on any map. But the myths always hinted at pockets like this. Edge realms, little gaps in the world where the rules thin out and the gods retire. The ancients called them liminal spaces. The Romans called them intermundia, between worlds. Historians still argue whether these places were symbolic metaphors, or if the myths were describing something real that we've just forgotten how to find. As you step deeper into the glade, something flickers past your vision. A shimmer, a ripple in the air, and they're lounging against a tree stump, peeling an orange with a dagger, far too dramatic for the jobbies Hermes. You blink. Doesn't. Well, he says, voice like silver coins in a coat pocket. Look who finally walked all the way to the quiet part. You raise an eyebrow. How long have you been here? He shrugs. Long enough to finish 5 oranges and a mild identity crisis? You glance around. Did you follow us? Nope. Been here the whole time. He smiles with that annoying god-tier smirk. You're just now tuned in enough to see me. Of course you sit down across from him. So what now? Hermes tosses a peel over his shoulder. It vanishes before it hits the ground. Well, he says Poseidon's off the grid. Zeus is brooding in his lightning closet. Hera started a book club about revenge poetry. The old gods are quiet. And you? I deliver messages, he says with a little bow. Always have, always will, even if nobody's writing letters anymore. You frown. Is this a message? He nods. Sort of. More of a whisper from the edges. You lean back on your elbows, staring up through the tree canopy. It's dotted with stars, even though the sun hasn't fully left. Classic liminal space behavior. So what's the whisper say? You ask. Hermes picks at the bark of his stump. The stories never end. They just downshift, quiet cycles. Background modes. Gods don't die. They just take naps that last millennia. You let that sink in? So this whole journey wasn't about finding Poseidon's next temple or some secret storm scroll. Hermes grins. Nope. It was about slowing down enough to notice that even a god can lose himself. And that's okay. You laugh quietly. That's not exactly bedtime story material. Sure it is, he says. Because bedtime stories aren't always about heroes slaying things. Sometimes they're about laying things down. You think about Poseidon, his feet in the surf, carving spirals into the sand. Yeah, that tracks. Hermes stands and stretches the orange dagger, now somehow a walking stick. You should keep going, he says, gesturing vaguely into the trees. Why? Because the next part of the myth needs a witness. What if I don't want to? He shrugs. Then stay. Nap under a fig tree. No one's grading you. You consider that. But the breeze shifts again, and something in your chest leans forward. You stand. Hermes winks, then vanishes. No poof, no sparkle. Just not there anymore. You walk deeper into the trees. Each step feels lighter, not metaphorically, physically. Like gravity is thinning out. Maybe it's the emotional baggage that's dropping off, one grudge or worry at a time. You pass stone arches wrapped in ivy. A mossy fountain shaped like a lion's head trickles something that I ascend to water but you Dante ask. You pass a grove where laughter floats through the air, even though there's no one visible. It's not eerie. It's nostalgic. Like the world remembering how to be kind. There's a tree ahead with bark like whalebone. Beneath it sits a low stone table. And on that table, an old sand-smoothed map. You pick it up. There are no markings, no names. Just a soft shimmer, like sunlight through leaves. And when you touch it, you hear Poseidon's voice. It's faint and distant. If you ever get lost, remember sometimes not knowing where you are is the first step to remembering who you are. You fold the map and pocket it. Ahead, the trees part. The light changes again, cooler, quieter. Like the world is dimming the lights for your sake, and you walk on not to escape, just to arrive. You move through the thinning trees, their branches parting above like the ceiling of an old theater right before the final act. The path beneath your feet becomes softer, more symbolic than practical, no footprints, just intent. And then the trees vanish entirely and you find yourself at the edge of a cliff, not a dramatic world-ending one, just a high place. The wind here smells ancient, like old parchment and rain on marble. The sea lies far below, murmuring to itself like it's in on the secret ending. And there, sitting cross-legged on a flat rock, sketching swirls into the air with a fingertip is Poseidon. He doesn't turn. Doesn't need to. It came back, he says, as if you'd only gone to grab a snack. You'd sit beside him, legs dangling over the edge. The rock is warm but not hot, just present. Poseidon nods toward the sea. Looks different from up here. Does. Not angry, not expectant. Just there, more lake than tempest. Smooth as brushed silver. Feels smaller, you say. Males. Or maybe we've grown. The sky above stretches wide and pale like a fresh page. A few clouds lounge around like they're trying to form sheep shapes but got distracted. Poseidon sets down the trident beside him. It doesn't thrum anymore, just lies there content. Retired, he picks up a stone and tosses it lazily, arcs through the air and vanishes soundlessly into the vastness. You know, he says, when I first woke up from the long sleep, whatever that was, I thought I'd lost everything. You look at him and now, shrugs. Turns out I just misplaced it, you nod. A god taking a gap century. Exactly. He laughs, rubbing his temple like he's surprised by how light he feels. You wouldn't believe how exhausting it is constantly being worshipped. People don't want truth. They want predictable miracles. They want angry waves and moody declarations. You grin. You were pretty good at those. At range, he says with mock pride. A silence settles again, but not awkward. Just open. Somewhere below a dolphin squeaks, like the sea is giggling. Poseidon turns to you. Serious now. There's something I should tell you. You straighten. I wasn't just looking for a beach. No. I was looking for a place where the sea didn't need me, where I could stop defining myself by what I ruled. You take that in? That's a pretty tall order for someone whose job title literally meant Earthshaker. He laughs, nods. Yeah, I know. When the quakes stop, you start to hear other things, like the sound of moss growing, or the sigh of a sky content to stay still, or the quiet voice in your head that doesn't ask for power, just permission to rest. Historians still argue whether Poseidon's disappearance marked the beginning of divine obsolescence, or the end of humanity's need for explanation by entity. Some say it was the start of secularism. Others say it was just a myth getting tired of its own repetition. Poseidon reaches into a small pouch at his side. A weathered, salt-stained thing and pulls out a single blue stone. It's smooth, like it's been tumbled through the centuries. Hands it to you? What is it? A token, he says simply. Not magic, not sacred, just something to remember this by. You hold it in your palm. It's warm, like it knows your temperature already. You pocket it without another word. Poseidon stands. The wind tussles his hair, making him look 10 years younger and 5 gods lighter. I think I'll stay up here for a while, he says. Let the ocean be what it wants. Let the world not miss me. You nod. What should I tell them if they ask? He smiles. Tell them I retired before it was cool. You laugh. He grins wider. Or say I'm out looking for better sandals. Whatever fits the mood. The wind picks up slightly, brushing against your face, like a cat demanding neither food nor affection, just acknowledgement. Poseidon looks out over the sea one more time, then back at you. Thank you, he says. For what? For seeing me. Not the god, not the symbol. Just me. It's a small thing to say, and somehow the biggest. He turns, walking back toward the tree line. No fanfare, no golden light, just a man whose story has changed shape. You watch until he disappears into the green. Then you turn your eyes back to the horizon. The ocean doesn't beckon. It doesn't test. It just breathes. You sit a little longer, listening, remembering, and letting go. Because sometimes the truest myth isn't the one that ends in triumph or tragedy, but the one that ends in peace. You remain on the cliff's edge, letting your breath fall and sink with the sea far below. The sky is starting to fade into that tender pre-dusk gray, where the light loses its sharpness and becomes more suggestion than shape. There's no rush to leave, no signal telling you it's time. Just an understanding that the story SNDISNT waiting ahead, it's gently wrapping around you now. The blue stone in your pocket hums faintly. It's not like a magic charm, more like the echo of a good conversation. It's a little warmth that says, you were here. This happened. You mattered. You stretch your legs out, leaning back on your hands. A seagull flaps lazily overhead, probably with nothing better to do than look impressive in silhouette. The sea still glitters, but it no longer calls to you. It feels complete now. Less like a mystery, more like a friend who's fine without your constant checking in. The myths never told you what came after. Not really. They always ended with some final line, and thus Poseidon returned to the deep ore, and the hero sailed home in triumph, as if real endings ever arrived so neatly. But this feels honest, messy, wandering, slow, like a sunset that doesn't want to bother with a finale. You rise to your feet, slowly. There's no weight in your limbs, no dread about what's next, just a simple, grounded readiness. As you walk away from the cliff's edge, you notice a new path has opened. It wasn't there before. Mossy, narrow, curling downward between ferns that glow slightly in the dimming light. You follow it. There are no signs. No glowing portals, no statues humming with divine presence, just the quiet rustle of trees, the chirp of one persistent insect who's maybe a little too proud of his wing strength, and the rhythmic beat of your own steps on soft ground. You pass a grove of trees bent into arches naturally, but perfectly, like the forest is applauding your quiet victory. Or maybe just waving goodbye with style. You laugh softly to yourself. Poseidon would love this dramatic flourish. And somewhere maybe he does. Historians still argue whether this last part of the story, what some call the withdrawal of the gods, was a metaphor for the human maturation process, or a literal record of divine retreat. There's no consensus. Fringe theories even propose this phase marked the beginning of a new pantheon, one shaped by introspection rather than control. But the debates always forget something. The gods never said goodbye. They just stepped aside. You step out of the trees and find yourself on a quiet beach again, not the same one. A little cooler. Pebbles instead of sand. But the same hush. The same wide, waiting sky. The waves greet your ankles like an old friend who knows you don't need to speak. You kneel and run your fingers through the water, swirls and pulls away, but not urgently. Like it's reminding you, this isn't yours to keep, but you are always welcome. You stay like that a long while. When you finally rise, brushing your hands dry, you look out one last time. You whisper, "Thank you." Not because you owe the sea anything, not because Poseidon needs to hear it, just because the myth deserves it. And as you turn and walk back into the trees, you don't feel like a traveler returning from a quest. You feel like someone who was lost and got wonderfully, perfectly sidetracked by a boring Greek myth that turned out not to be boring at all, just quiet. And now, as the story quiets around you, the world tilts gently towards stillness. The beach fades, the forest softens, and all the gods who once demanded your attention slowly return to their long naps and sea-salted dreams. The wind still moves, but without urgency. Just a whisper brushing your cheek as if even the air is starting to yawn. Your limbs grow heavier, now not from exhaustion, but from release. As if the weight of wandering, has gently lifted, leaving only your breath and a blanket of calm. You picture Poseidon feet in the tide, no trident in hand, no crown on his brow. Just a man watching the horizon without needing to change it. That's how myths should end, maybe not in lightning or fury, but in someone finally choosing peace. Let your mind drift, now. Let it roll with the tide and settle in the sand. You're not in a story anymore. You're just here. Still, safe, soft around the edges. No temples to rebuild. No storms to name. Only rest. If dreams come, they'll come slow and blue and warm, like waves that remember your name but don't say it aloud. Breathe deep. Let go. And let sleep carry you the rest of the way.